So the difficulty of the shape of things isn't about a difficulty of understanding, although some of us may think it's difficult to understand how Evelyn could do what she did, her sense of ethics, her moral code. I mean, she follows rules. She has a moral system. The rules are not to say you must, to see how much change she can affect, only using the human will, her what was her she used her seduction, she used the appearance of love to craft and mold his to affect change in her lump of marble that would turns out was Adam. So it was clear that she had rules. It's just that most of us think those rules are unethical. Most of think those rules are a violation of the contract that two people have, that we're playing in the same reality. She counters it, well, it's subjective. You thought you were in love, so you felt your love. I thought this was a project, so it was a project. And this big question of subjectivity is such a difficult word, right? It's all subjective. Your experience is your experience, and my experience is my experience. So this whole discourse of subjectivity, of radical subjectivity, is a really important philosophical concept, a philosophical problem. How much of perception is unique to me, and how much of perception is about a reality, a world that we share? And this continues to be a huge amount of, is the country doing well right now? Or is it only me? Is it just my opinion that feels, my subjective feeling that things aren't going so well? Well, that subjective versus shared reality is caught up with the issues of what's historical truth and what's fictive fabrication, what's spin, what's fantasy, what's storytelling. This is a really important distinction. Real history, real life, and fantasy, make-believe, spin. So this is one of the problems of the play, and I think we see the devastation, the difficulty of this play is that we see the devastation that confusion about real and make-believe can make. Specifically, I think it's one of our greatest fears. I think we're terribly afraid that we're being duped, that what somebody says isn't the truth, isn't real, that they say, I love you, baby, you're the one for me. Well, are they saying that from a place of sincerity, an integrated whole person place of sincerity, or are they just saying words to get me to do something, to get me in bed, or to get me into the house, or to get me whatever? Am I being manipulated? Or am I being communicated with? That's the difference. Can we trust the words? And it's a really big issue in human relationships. It's also, at the artists, the philosophers, a really big issue of testing these limits, testing how do we know. And it has moral implications. It has issues for discernment. It has issues for our feelings of safety and security and home. So it is difficulty. I mean, the fact that this isn't what I thought it was, this notion that I've been deceived, manipulated, or duped, I think it's a really big fear that we all have. And this play is so good at throwing that fear right out for us. How much do you empathize with Adam's heartbreak? How much are you horrified by Evelyn's fakery, Evelyn's project, Evelyn's artistry? So, a difficult philosophical idea and a difficult feeling, the fear, to evoke our fear of being deceived. That's the effective, that's the cathartic, cathartic simulation of a fear and horror in us that a tragedy affects, the tragedy, the theatrical, dramatic tragedy of this play. So, That's pretty cool. There's a bunch of other interesting stuff in this text as well. And one of the things I really wanted to point out is it's so easy to follow this play. I mean, even the movie's delightful. You really can kind of get caught up in how much Adam's changing and what's going on with Evelyn, and isn't that cool? The pictures, taking pictures of their lovemaking and videos, and these really are boundaries. Would you let your beloved? Videotape your sex play? I won't. I sure as heck won't. Is that crossing a boundary? What's it mean to represent, to make all the problem people have gotten into sending dick pics? I mean, my gosh, they're everywhere. Don't take pictures of yourself naked and put them anywhere. Really bad idea. And we're finding that out you can see this is videotape back then, but as you can see the technology changing and the mores changing, but there's real dangers of what people do with the representations of our own bodies. The issue of catfishing, of people representing themselves as one identity when it's really just a play, when it's deception. It's become a really huge issue with online dating, with all the equipment that we have. And you guys are kind of in the thick of it. I am quite happily married. I'm an old man. I have a lovely family. I'm so glad I don't have to be out there dating anymore. You guys aren't. You're in the thick of it. For those of you who want to live a life, committed relationship with a partner, or to create a family of some ways, these are really real world live issues. And I think it's nice to see them articulated and brought up. It's interesting to see them played out on stage and in literature as a way of sort of learning from their experience, of making us wiser. So we're kind of surprised at what Evelyn did, but just as we shouldn't really have been that surprised of the sex play in Brokeback Mountain. I mean, there were those pencil-length shadows popping up at dawn. When we look back at this play, especially if you read through the script, we really shouldn't be as surprised as we are about what happens, because there's not only foreshadowing, as we saw in that very first scene, but there's also all kinds of literary allusions, references to outside work. And it is at one level, the great literary allusion is the Ovidian Pygmalion trope. Trope just means a pattern. It's like a large pattern that we see in literature. Trope. So we talk about Ovidian tropes, or patterns from Ovid that play out in other literature, or the Ovidian Pygmalion trope is this notion. What is it? It needs an artist, it needs a work of art, and it sort of means some kind of mix-up of real life and represented life. The fake represented sculpture in Pygmalion, Venus turns into a real woman. Make-believe, or art or artifice or representation, becomes real world. It's a huge violation. Not the first time we've seen this issue. In Dante, right, we see the Guinevere and Lancelot and Arthur, they're reading the Roman de la Rose, and they let the book made them do it. The represented world of King Arthur's story pops out and affects the real world of Paolo and Francesca, which pops out and makes us sympathize with Dante's feigning. So, this play between make-believe representational world and our real lived experience is an issue that's fascinated writers and thinkers throughout the Western tradition. And we really have an extreme version here. We have a feminist artist, a woman artist. And perhaps this is a revision, an attack, a correction of the misogyny, of the women hating in Pygmalion's text. I mean, that first bit, because there are no virtuous women, Pygmalion was a bachelor because there wasn't a single virtuous woman out there. You sexist bastard. How dare you not? So that's the sort of the woman-loving feminist critique of Pygmalion, is that this dude can't deal